What if the thing everyone calls your weakness is actually your hidden strength? What if being lazy doesn't mean being useless, but misunderstood? Most people believe success belongs only to the strongest, the fastest, or the hardest workers. But today's story questions that belief. This is the story of a boy who avoided effort whenever he could. A boy people laughed at. A boy no one expected anything from. Yet when life pushed him into a corner, he didn't win by working harder. He won by thinking smarter. By the end of this video, you'll see laziness in a completely different way. And you'll learn one simple idea that can change how you face your own struggles. Stay till the end, because the final lesson is the most powerful one, and it might explain why you've been stuck for so long. Ethan lived in a small, quiet village where life followed the same routine every day. People woke up early, work hard, and believed that effort was the only measure of a person's worth. In this village, being busy meant being respected. Ethan did not fit into that world. He lived with his father, Mr. Hale, in a modest house near the edge of the farmland. Every morning, Ethan went to the fields to help. But while others worked with full energy, Ethan always looked for the easiest way to finish his tasks. He avoided heavy lifting. He avoided long hours. And whenever possible, he found shortcuts. To the villagers, this made him lazy. They watched him rest while others struggled. They shook their heads and whispered that the boy had no future. Even his father worried in silence. Not because Ethan refused to help, but because he never pushed himself. He never challenged his limits. Yet there was something no one noticed. Despite doing less physical work, Ethan always completed his responsibilities. The fields were protected. The tasks were done. And problems were solved, just not in the usual way. Ethan didn't rely on strength. He relied on thinking. At the time, it didn't matter. In that village, intelligence without effort was still seen as failure. And soon, life would test Ethan in a way he could no longer avoid. For a long time, Ethan's quiet way of working seemed harmless. Life moved slowly, and his father managed the harder tasks without complaint. But one summer, everything changed. The season was harsh. The land was dry. And Mr. Hale fell seriously ill. Suddenly, the work Ethan had avoided became his responsibility. The fields needed constant care. The crops needed water. And there was no one else to help. At first, Ethan tried to manage it the way he always had, doing just enough, resting when he felt tired, hoping things would work out. They didn't. Day after day, the sun burned the land. The crops began to wither. Ethan's body was not used to such heavy labor, and his old tricks were no longer enough. No matter how smart he was, he couldn't be everywhere at once. One evening, Ethan sat alone outside his home, staring at the dark sky. For the first time, he felt something deeper than tiredness. He felt regret. He realized that avoiding effort had a cost. And now, that cost was his family's future. As he listened to the distant sounds of the village, Ethan understood a painful truth. If he didn't change something soon, he would lose everything that mattered to him. And that was when he heard the news that would change his life forever. The next morning, the village felt different. People gathered in small groups, speaking with excitement and disbelief. Curious, Ethan followed the noise until he reached the town square. A messenger stood in the center, announcing a great challenge. A public competition would be held far away, open to anyone brave enough to try. The reward was something Ethan had never imagined, wealth large enough to change a family's fate forever. As the words sank in, Ethan felt his heart race. That reward could save his home. It could save his father. It could fix the mistake he believed he had made. Before fear could stop him, Ethan stepped forward and declared that he would enter. The crowd burst into laughter. Some shook their heads. Others whispered that the lazy boy had finally lost his mind. No one believed he stood a chance against strong, trained competitors. Ethan heard them. But for once, he didn't care. This was not about pride. This was not about proving them wrong. This was about survival. For the first time in his life, Ethan had a reason bigger than comfort. Bigger than rest. Bigger than fear. He packed his few belongings and began the long journey ahead. Behind him, the village watched in doubt. Ahead of him waited a test that would force Ethan to discover what he was truly capable of. And the real challenge had not even begun yet. After days of travel, Ethan finally reached the place of the competition. What he saw made his confidence fade. The area was filled with powerful men. Tall, muscular, experienced. They stretched their arms, laughed loudly, and looked ready for battle. Ethan stood quietly among them, feeling small. When the rules were announced, tension filled the air. The first test was simple but demanding. All participants had to cross a wide lake. Only the fastest would move forward. At the signal, everyone rushed toward the water. Strong arms cut through the surface as bodies pushed forward with force and speed. Ethan didn't jump in. He stood still, watching. He knew something important. If he followed them, he would lose. Instead of panicking, Ethan looked around. His mind slowed down while others rushed. Nearby, he noticed broken wood and fallen branches. An idea formed. While the others wasted their energy fighting the water, Ethan began working calmly. He used what he found to create a simple floating support. It wasn't fast. It wasn't impressive. But it worked. As the swimmers grew tired, Ethan moved forward steadily. Little by little, he passed those who had relied only on strength. By the time he reached the other side, he had done the impossible. Ethan qualified. The crowd fell silent. The lazy boy had survived the first test, not by force, but by thinking differently. And the next challenge would demand even more than intelligence. The next day, the remaining competitors were brought to an open road under the hot sun. At the center of the path lay massive wooden blocks, each one heavy enough to test even the strongest person. The rule was clear. Each contestant had to move the block a long distance to the finish line. Behind them were several tools. They were allowed to choose only one. The moment the signal was given, the others rushed forward. One grabbed a rope and began pulling with all his strength. Another chose a long stick, trying to force the block forward little by little. Sweat poured from their faces as the crowd cheered them on. Ethan didn't move. He studied the block. He studied the road. And then he studied the tools. His heart was calm, but his mind was working fast. He knew the truth now. This was not a test of power. It was a test of understanding. After a long moment, Ethan picked up a small knife. The crowd was confused. Some laughed again. A knife could not move a block that heavy. But Ethan ignored the noise. Instead of pushing, he began to carve. Slowly and carefully, he reshaped the wood. Time passed. Others struggled. Ethan focused. When he finished, the block was no longer a block. It was a wheel. With one steady push, the problem that defeated everyone else became simple. Ethan rolled it forward while the others fought against weight and resistance. Step by step, he moved ahead. And before anyone realized what was happening, Ethan crossed the finish line first. For a few seconds, the entire place fell silent. The crowd stared at Ethan in disbelief. The same boy they had laughed at. The same boy they had dismissed as lazy. Now standing alone at the finish line. Then the cheers erupted. People who had mocked him moments earlier were now clapping. Judges exchanged surprised looks. Even the strongest competitors stood still, trying to understand what had just happened. Ethan didn't raise his arms. He didn't shout. He simply stood there, breathing deeply, realizing that he had done it, not by pushing his body beyond its limits, but by using his mind with purpose. For the first time, Ethan was seen differently. He was no longer the boy who avoided effort. He was the boy who understood effort. He had learned when to work hard, when to think, and when to change the problem instead of fighting it. As the prize was handed to him, Ethan felt something stronger than victory. He felt clarity. He understood that intelligence without purpose had kept him small. But intelligence with responsibility had changed everything. And the lesson of his journey was just beginning to reveal itself. Ethan returned home a different person. Not louder. Not prouder. Just clearer. He used his reward to restore what had been lost and to care for his father. But the real change wasn't in his life. It was in his thinking. Ethan finally understood something most people never learn. Laziness is not always the absence of ability. Often, it is the absence of a reason. When there was no purpose, he avoided effort. When something truly mattered, he became focused, creative, and disciplined. The world had taught him that working harder was the only path forward. Life taught him something deeper. Working smarter, with intention, is what creates real progress. This story isn't about avoiding effort. It's about choosing the right effort. About using your mind instead of burning yourself out. About finding a reason strong enough to pull the best version of you forward. If you've ever been called lazy, maybe the truth is different. Maybe you're waiting for a reason that matters to you. And when you find it, everything can change. Thank you for watching. If this story made you think, stay connected. More stories like this are coming.